I'm Haley Adams, and my co-host today is Jess Koala. I'm literally live in the Castro.
We're in other places.
We're nearby. On this episode, we're interviewing Leslie Mah to get some of her stories on growing up, playing in Tribe 8, and battling cancer as a tattooer. Leslie has been tattooing since 1996 in the Bay Area. She was a part of the queercore music scene in the 90s with her band Tribe 8. Tribe 8 played with bands like Bikini Kill and Siouxsie and the Banshees. And every time I see Leslie out in public, I want to swarm her with like 800 questions, but I pick 2 questions for myself. And I'm like, okay, it won't be rude if I just ask 2. And then I want to keep going, but I stop myself because I'm like, oh, it's going to be rude. And I'm just taking up her time. So now I've got Leslie trapped and I can ask all the questions that I want. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. Could you hear my dog barking? I feel like as soon as it started, someone started a leaf blower near my building and my dog just started barking. So hopefully it's calm from here on out. No.
I can hear it.
I'm good. And hopefully people will be kind to us since this is your first podcast that you're hosting. So congratulations. And this is my first time doing any kind of video interview like this live. I was just saying that I'm an analog person. And I'm really grateful. All the things that Gabe was saying that's happening on this channel just sound amazing. Yeah. And they're really building a really great thing. Or, they've been doing it for years, so I guess it's here. And it's great that they're expanding to be more and more inclusive. So yeah, awesome. Thanks for them. And I think it's hilarious that you have so many questions for me.
I'm like, okay, so basically I want your entire life story, but we only have an hour. So I'll try to steer it as much as I can with that stuff. Would you start off by telling us some of your family history, and maybe Gabe can pull up some photos that you sent?
My family history is so mythical. I've got all these cousins, and my dad has, he's from a family with, 7 kids. Everybody has sort of a different version. The eldest was 20, almost 20 when they immigrated, and the youngest was, a baby, and then the very youngest sibling was born here. So, but they came over.
From where?
They, just in my dad's short life there, he experienced the Japanese insurrection and World War II, and then now it's called the Communist Revolution, but they refer to it as the Civil War, and it was pretty horrible. The situation there was horrible, of course, before the Civil Wars even started happening, but it was 1947, and they had just lifted the Chinese Exclusion Act. Oops. But which was, it was a ban, it was a racist ban on anybody of Chinese heritage. Mm-hmm. And we've been seeing that more recently, where there's the Muslim ban, and there's just bans on all these, basically people of color, people from places that aren't Europe. And so, this the Chinese Exclusion Act lasted for 70 years. And after World War II, you know, part of like working with China during World War II was like, okay, we'll start to ease the ban. So in 1947, they gave visas to like 105 Chinese people. And this isn't citizenship, this is just visas. And my family got 7 of them.
Dang.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So it was a little bit nefarious, you know, how all of that happened. I'm not really sure. You know, there's some really sad stories about my grandfather losing his first wife and his first 2 children, and, you know, being born very poor and not getting any education. But, you know, he ended up like having some pretty interesting connections, and it's sort of yet to be verified. And it's also unverified of like our ancestry. My father's family is Muslim, and we're not sure if we're Wei or if we're Uyghur. So anyway, there's a lot there. But when they came here, my grandfather couldn't speak English, and so he couldn't really work. But he opened a tiny shop in Manhattan, and called Ming's. I think you just saw a slide for that. And, you know, the girls, the sisters all worked in the shop for no pay, as my Aunt Ming Ching likes to always remind everybody, for years, you know, so the boys could get an education. And so on the left, there's Ming Shu, and on the far right is Ming Ching, and then the man is my grandfather. And Ming Shu passed away early in her 20s from gynecological cancer. And it's always been just sort of like, well, what exactly, you know, happened? But she passed away, and then both of her sisters, all my father's sisters, you know, had tumors, and so they were unable to have children. They all had hysterectomies. And on my mother's side, my mother passed away about 25 years ago, younger than I am now, from gynecological cancer. And one of her sisters has had the same cervical cancer that I did, and the other sister also had survived gynecological cancer. So it's like all the women one generation older than me all had gynecological cancer. And, you know, they say it's not hereditary or genetic, and that like cervical cancer is always caused by HPV, but I tested negative for HPV. When I got my diagnosis, I called my dad and I called my sister. My sister was very distraught because, you know, our mother had passed from her cancer. And she, when she got her, she went and got a PAP, and it came back positive. So, but she caught it early enough that she just had an outpatient procedure. So, you know,
you guys both had it at the same time.
Yeah, she had something different. She had squamous cell. Yeah. So I feel like it's really important for people to continue to get their PAPs. And, you know, I can sit here and tell people over and over to get tested and get your screenings, but if people don't have access to healthcare, that's, you know, also a problem. So anyway, I guess I just jumped forward to
hereditary. Like they say that's not hereditary, but then it's
Correct.
Like most of the women in the family. It's pretty wild.
All the women, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, could I just interject real quick? Leslie,
Sure.
Your microphone, sometimes when you could touch it sometimes and it'll go crackle, but it's rubbing against your shirt.
Oh.
If you could just be a little bit aware of it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
You were gonna say that we jumped ahead a little to to that part, but it's great introduction. But so okay, they opened that store in Brooklyn. Is that what you said?
In Manhattan.
Manhattan.
But they lived in Queens.
Were you born in Queens and Manhattan, or were
No.
you here?
I was actually born in Illinois, where both of my parents had gotten, well, my father, they both got scholarships to go to the University of Illinois, and that's where they met. My father was actually the first Asian person in the engineering department at the University of Illinois, the very first. And now, and his younger brother also went to the same school, and they recently went back and they were like, yeah, it's all Asian people there now. Like, but yeah, yeah, my dad was the first, and his roommate was the second African American to attend. So they, I don't know. There's
the first out there, and their roommates.
His roommate was the second African American, but they don't, like a lot of people of that generation, they don't really tell the stories. They don't talk about how hard it was, and I know it was hard. Like, when my aunt Ming Xu passed away really young, it was very hard on the family. And I'm actually the first cousin of my generation, and I was named after her, my middle name, my Chinese name. So it feels sort of like this, a legacy that we're stopping now, because my niece and nephew, the children of my sister who tested positive, have both been vaccinated against HPV, and it just feels like, yeah, we don't have to suffer unnecessarily, I mean, there's already so much suffering built into life, but
the beauty of vaccines there, right?
Yeah. So actually this painting right here, you can't see it. It's called Demon Slayer. It's my niece when she was a teenager, and she had just moved out. And she had just come back from Europe, and she stayed with me for like 10 days. And I made her sit and pose for me. And you can't really see it, but you can go to my Instagram and look at the whole process. I posted the process of painting this. And we actually went and bought a heart for her to hold. And it was a little bit too mushy, so I ended up just using like a potato carved into the shape. The heart was, she was such a good sport, right? I actually gave her the option of posing with an octopus or a heart, and she chose the heart. So anyway, she
octopus would be pretty.
Oh, you're gonna go out the way. Yeah. And now that I know more about octopuses, I wouldn't even, I don't eat them anymore or anything. Yeah, there's a.
Will you tell us how old you were whenever you started playing for Tribe 8 or started like playing music?
I was a little bit of a late bloomer. I was one of those kids who, like, I slept with the radio on, and I listened to all kinds of music. And when I was really young, I used to think that if I fell asleep listening to classical music, I would just learn how to play it.
That's a nice thought.
Right. I mean, when you're a kid, like you believe you have magical thinking, right? But so I think I was like 19 when I first bought actually a bass guitar. And I took lessons, and the person who actually really inspired me to play bass was Tina Weymouth of the Talking Heads. And the first song that I learned how to play was Psycho Killer on the bass. And it wasn't until I moved to San Francisco in 1988. But I had a band, ASF, and actually I'm playing bass there, right? This is I think I'm maybe, I don't know, 20 or 21. And that's my girlfriend in the background who wanted to remain closeted. But yeah, Anti-Scrunchie Faction.
How? With the twin mohawks, how are you close? Just kidding.
Well, it's just really so good friends. Yeah.
As history says, really close.
Yes. Sisters. We look nothing alike, but
right.
We're actually playing at Clubfoot, which was a punk venue in it was in San Francisco. And this is before I moved here. And this is the first band that I toured with. We also played in Canada. We toured a little bit there. And the people who did Homocore, the zine, not Homocore, but JD's, which was one of the first queer zines, set up those shows. GB Jones and Bruce LaBruce, who's a filmmaker. They're both filmmakers. And they set up our shows in Toronto. So
I think your mic is hitting your shirt again. Sorry.
It's so annoying. Sorry. Yeah. Here. But once we broke up, I moved to San Francisco in 88.
And where were you? You were in Illinois?
No, in Colorado. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up in Colorado.
Cool.
And it was definitely a different time and place than it is now.
Were you in Denver? Big city or?
Mm-mm. I was in Boulder, which was a very small hippie town, like CU was there, and it was a much smaller town. And it was very different. It was, I think, part of getting a mohawk was sort of just distract from being visibly queer and kind of visibly also racialized. There were so few, the Asian population, we were less than 1%. And I was people, to compliment me would, refer to me as exotic, but, it was pretty intense to be very racialized there. And then to move to San Francisco, where I suddenly felt very light-skinned, and also there's a lot less sunshine here. So all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I really am Irish, So I feel like I've had, sort of a unique childhood and young adulthood, because, here in California, there's really nothing unique so much or as much about being mixed, or definitely about being Asian at all. So a lot of the things that happened to me in Colorado they just do not happen in California at all. It was a very different way of being in the world. And I actually stopped dyeing my hair. Because it was it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. How did you choose to move to San Francisco?
When I was 18, me and my girlfriend to be hitchhiked out here because we wanted to see punk bands that never came to Denver or Boulder.
Yeah.
And we did go see bands like all the time. Because, you know, I mean, if you're going to be on tour, and actually you kind of have to drive through I-70. And so I actually did see a lot of bands, but we were kind of, you know, what they call a secondary market. But there was like in San Francisco, I was so interested in the punk scene here. And we literally just went out on the street and stuck our thumbs out and ended up in San Francisco, and we stayed out there for about a week and then hitchhiked home. Wow. And I wanted to move. I wanted a different life. I wanted to be somewhere, you know, there was a Chinatown and where there was like a lot more going on. You know, definitely in Colorado, the punk scene became extremely gentrified in the like mid 80s. And then white supremacists like just came in and really started to recruit everybody. And there were a lot of shows where my girlfriend and I were the only women at the shows. And it was crazy, you know,
I heard they were recruiting in like punk shows and stuff.
Oh, totally. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've watched a documentary on the KKK, and they're like, in the Junior Grand Wizard, you know, Sean Slater. I'm like, that guy used to be at all the punk shows.
Whoa!
You know? And he used to be beating people up, just whoever, you know.
Mm-hmm. Is that when like that punk backlash of like where you get like Nazi punks fuck off and
yeah, I mean,
no, but then like it's also like a whole genre too, like of like the skinhead punks, and they're like,
so yeah, you know, the laces and your Doc Martens, and it was people had this, it was very fascination with Nazis and just the aesthetic, you know, whereas like, you know, skinhead didn't start off that way. It was something that happened in England, but that was more of a working class culture. So, but yeah, this started happening. It was it got really bad. You know, people got beat up all the time at shows by the neo-Nazis. And, you know, when Columbine happened, which is a really long time ago now, and people were just shocked because it was, you know, in Golden, Colorado, you know, this little town where they make cores.
Yeah.
Right. But it was, you know, like the first big school shooting. And, you know, and it kind of came out that like these boys had a fascination with Hitler and white supremacy and Nazis. And people were just shocked, and they blamed Marilyn Manson or whatever. And it's like, I wasn't shocked at all, you know, at all, because
you're like seeing it firsthand, like every day. Right. Every time you try to go to these shows and stuff, you're like, oh yeah, they exist. Like when I'm in a big city, you're like, you definitely get like all the aspects of society, like good and bad, but like all closer together so you can like see it, right? And then they're out in the country and they're like, oh, I don't know, huh?
When you see that anger directed at you, you're not as shocked when something like this happens, maybe.
Right. I mean, I was kind of, I'm like 5'2", but those boys were scared of me, you know, and
they should be.
I mean, there was sort of this feeling that, you know, I don't know, I didn't have fear in the pit, you know, and I actually got hurt a lot, but a lot, you know, I'd been around for a few years, so I had some seniority, you know, and I was in a band, so, but it definitely was tense, you know, and there were definitely a lot of those folks who, you know, they would get drunk and they would start admitting that like, well, you know, I don't want to be gay, but, you know,
But what?
but they, would have like, they would talk about, sleeping with or having sex with, or even having like a boyfriend or girlfriend. And so it was bullshit. But I definitely wanted to leave because it just felt like I couldn't hold my own, and my girlfriend that I had been with for years didn't want to be out. So
what about in the queercore scene? Like, do you think those shows like felt like a safer place?
Oh yeah. Well, that was totally different, right?
Yeah.
So that was, that didn't happen until like the early 90s. So I'm talking about like the mid 80s in Colorado. And then, it took like 8 years for us to, DIY our own scene. So, when that happened, it was a very different thing. And it's also like when you're on stage, you have a certain amount of power. Like you have the microphone, the lights are on you, and you can call people out. I mean, that was something that we did and a lot of other bands started doing, of like, hey, you stop this shit, you'd stop playing and say, kick this person out, and I would always be like, hey, short people in front, we want the women in front, like we want the queers in front. And that was like amazing to be able to request that, it felt really, really good. Of just like, and if anyone gave me any slack, it'd be like, look, you can go in any other show and you can be in front, and you're welcome to be here, but you're not in the middle. Like you just, it's not about you tonight, and you're okay.
Yeah.
And then if they keep giving you shit, then like,
you have the power to stop the whole show. Fucking
your head is at my boot, so like it's a stem.
Literally. What do you think your favorite show, or one of your favorite shows, was that you played with Tribe 8?
Ooh, it's really a blur. We played a lot of shows.
Okay, your most memorable.
I mean, with a lot of hindsight, the most horrible ones, like everybody was sick. I injured myself. Like I ran into a rusty nail coming out of a sound booth in the Midwest somewhere and punctured my calf. And that really sucked. Oh wait,
do you want to hear a clip? I want to see it. Let's do it, Gabe.
I was gonna play it silently, but I got the tunes on here. Hold on.
I want to hear some.
What's going on?
Flipper.
Oh, I might need to share it with. This is being wonky, huh? Sorry about this. Let me.
All right. Well, we'll continue. Let us know when you got a clip.
This is a rockumentary by Tracy Flanagan, and she came to a few of our shows and decided that she wanted to make a documentary, and that was kind of a weird thing, but I'm so glad
I should have watched
she did it. What's that?
I said I should have watched it before. That's so exciting. I want to watch it.
Oh, it's not taking the.
What about one of those music videos? If it has one of those.
It seems like.
Or you could roll it. We could just talk.
Yeah.
The thing is, as soon as I start, it stops.
Oh, it's okay.
It's probably not like in the YouTube for the cast. Sorry about that.
Oh, good. Okay, so the one where you had a nail puncture your calf. What's that?
I mean, that was pretty horrible. It did end up getting infected. It was pretty gnarly. I mean, it was so different touring back then, because like you would leave and you wouldn't know. We didn't have cell phones, right? We didn't have computers. It was really different. And we had this thing called Ocean in a Bottle. And it was basically you would just get a tape recording of the sound of quarters falling into a payphone. And then you would pick up the phone and you would play it, right, like on your Walkman.
Hackers style. The movie Hackers, they do that.
Oh,
and it was an old trick that I've heard, really worked.
All right.
You guys invented it. Right?
You did it. Yeah.
We did it. And then
wait, so what would happen? So that's how you would record the sound? Or
well, yeah. But then you would just have this tape, right? And you would play it into the phone, and then you would call people. But it was kind of hard. You couldn't make a phone date. You would just randomly call people, and you would try and make a time that you would call again. But it was kind of like, would you be able to find a phone booth in Ypsilanti that was available at that time? Would you even like get there to the show? Or, like how long would sound check take or whatever. So it was, it was a lot harder, I think, in some ways, but then in other ways, like you were so present in the van, like you were so stuck in this like container with like 5 other people that you're just passing
real well.
Yeah, and you're just passing germs back and forth. One person gets sick, a 2 shows later, everyone's sick. And you never have a tour where people aren't sick. So
do you feel like you have any moment that you're like, oh, that was the best day on stage? Or like, oh, that was like so awesome whenever? I don't know. I've heard some, and I don't want to bring them up. I want you to.
It was always really fun to play Madison, Wisconsin. But I can't remember if this particular event happened in Madison. But there was a particular person who was harassing us a lot. He was super drunk, and he kept trying to get on stage, and I kept like, no, trying to hold the line. And when he did, I was like, dude, you got to get off. And he wouldn't. And I picked him up and I tossed him, and he actually really caught a lot of air. But,
like pure
he was drunk, and hopefully, I'm pretty sure he survived. But so, I don't know. I don't know if I should have mentioned that, because people might judge my character based on that. And I'm not really, I'm not in that kind of situation anymore. I don't know if I would do that again, but
sure you would. Come on.
Right.
So
crowd surfing is always fun.
I'm fascinated by these photos of your shows. You've even showed like me and Jess some when we're out and stuff, but where it's like that one that was posted recently. We probably won't show it on here, but where there's like a chick with her shirt off holding the mic, and she's wearing like baggy pants, and then it looks like a fucking punk show around it, and I'm like, that is like the queerest, most punk rock thing I have ever seen, So like, this is what I imagine your shows like, just like wild, and like also like these like safe places, and you get to play with like Bikini Kill and L7 and stuff like that. And I'm just like, wow, if I could have been there. Actually, who was there at one of your shows? Jess. Jess has photos.
I saw you. So I couldn't find any for today because they're all at my parents' house in Southern California. But I tried to see if my mom could dig up some photos. But yeah, I saw you guys when I was 17. You were playing with La Tigra, and it was incredible. And I'm positive that I have pictures of you on stage because it was like a life-changing thing for me. You know, I was this 17-year-old young queer kid, and it was a completely different experience. It was, you know, it was absolutely incredible. And I remember you on stage, you know, you guys were amazing. And when I met you, I didn't realize that it was you from Tribe 8. I knew you, Leslie Mah, as a tattooer. And so it was pretty crazy when, you know, I figured out that it was you. We were out for drinks, and you had mentioned, you know, my band Tribe 8. And I was like, oh my gosh, the worlds came together, you know, and I realized that you were also in this band that I had seen, and pretty incredible. Like, your band was incredible live. And
I remember it more like you talking about that Le Tigre show, and I said, oh, I was there.
Yeah.
And and you were like, oh, you were? And I said something like, yeah, I was playing guitar, and you said, you know Lynn Breedlove?
And you're like, yeah.
Yes, I know Lenny pretty well.
Yeah.
And Lenny's doing very well right now, despite all the fucking shit that he's been going through. But yeah.
I love that you got him to read at the Queer Tattoo Alliance event. I was like so excited.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you got into tattooing? Was this in the band stuff?
Yeah. Well, I was a fabric cutter, and I couldn't. And I went to San Francisco City College, and taking a lot of like different art classes, but I would also take like astronomy, and it was just something that, I don't know, I was so, and I also had like side projects and stuff, and you know, we were all trying to be non-monogamous. It was really it was very messy. He couldn't really you know, there was so much like multitasking chaos. But tattooing, I didn't get into it until 96. So how old was I? I was already in my 30s. And you know, it's something that I loved, and I was something of, you know, I got my first tattoo, you know, my first tattoos in Colorado, and it was not a popular thing to do. I got one on the side of my head, and I think I also did it to scare the skinheads, to shave the sides of my head and have tattoos, you know. But there was also always like, you know, are you a real punk? Are you truly hardcore? And, you know, proving your authenticity. And I remember I was getting tattooed by Freddie Corbin, who hadn't been tattooing very long. And I was, you know, talking about like, there was such a huge, movement in the early 90s in San Francisco. And they, you know, there's like all those books like Modern Primitives and everything that came out about, you know, tattooing, but it was kind of like all white guys, and they were doing kind of tribal work and stuff, you know. And it, you know, and I kind of was having this conversation with Freddie Corbin about it, and he was like, well, stop looking for the kick-ass, you know, badass lady, you know, tattoo artist, and just become one. And I was like,
yes.
And it was so out of character from, you know, the attitude, I think, at the time, that I remember it really clearly. And, you know, but it took a long time for that to happen, you know. So yeah, 96. It was right when I definitely wanted I wanted a chance to do this thing that I really wanted to do. And it, as we, all know, like the gatekeeping is or has been historically, like bikers and, very cishet white guys.
The first time I ever worked with a woman tattoo artist was in San Francisco, and that's like a good like 8 years into my career, and I was like, oh, they're gonna be so mean and like hard because they've been through so much shit. Because like I was used to the bikers and stuff that I used to work with, and like, oh, always like sad face, and then I was like, oh man, the girls are going to be so salty. I'm about to work at this shop with like 4 women, and I go in there and they're all like happy and like giggling. And they've been doing this for years. I'm like, oh my God, everything's fine. Like, why are they so happy? This is great. This is great. And I was just amazed. I was like, oh my God, lady tattooers, this is the coolest thing. And queers, like, geez. Yeah, I feel that though. Like just not that many, right?
Right. So, but in the Bay Area,
yeah,
that has been. So, and I'm hoping that it's different, right. There's a lot of things going on, like on Instagram during the pandemic, because we kind of are a little bit overwhelmed and trying to figure out what to do with ourselves. And I think that, a lot of these issues about, tattooing on dark skin and the gatekeeping of, the white guys and
oh my God,
keeping
do you want
us
to pull up that picture? You want to talk about
sure.
that? Hey, Gabe,
yeah. Well, this photo, this article I saw from just a couple days ago, and the Proud Boys had a big, rally in DC. I seem to think that whatever they think, but they take some sort of commitment to what they call Western chauvinism is their theme of white supremacy. I mean, it's just basically white supremacy, right? White chauvinism, or Western chauvinism, same thing. Yeah. And I'm just like, I immediately look at this photo. I always look at people's tattoos because, that's what we do.
Describe the image for when this is just a podcast. It's like,
so it's the headline. It's from Slate, and the headline says the church pastor on Trump supporters burning their Black Lives Matter sign. It was reminiscent of cross burnings. And I actually saw the clip of this, and it was viscerally just offensive and sickening.
And then guy,
right? And so it's sort of this crowd of like guys with beards and mirrored sunglasses. They're just so angry, and they're so mad they won't wear masks, and they're whatever, they're rebels. And the man who's front and center has these tattoos, and on his left arm it looks like it's a East Asian dragon, and it's very poorly executed, right? And then on his right arm is this really terrible ripoff of like a Borneo, Pacific Islander tribal.
Yeah.
which maybe, he didn't actually get in 1990. He got in 2006. And then the other one, I couldn't quite tell what it was. I'm like, just if he has a Black Panther, like they're just hilarious.
Oh man, he's
right?
like,
he's got it somewhere. I know it.
Like, yeah.
Right. But he has Antifa tattooed on his butt. But he, Actually, Karen Rose, the owner of Sacred Rose, who's been tattooing a very long time, identified it as a very poorly renditioned Sailor Jerry flash of a wolf. And this particular image was used in posters in England. And it was all like, be quiet, don't share state secrets with the Germans, the Nazis, right? It was the anti-Nazi propaganda. And I was like, no shit, that's interesting.
That's amazing.
So,
like, man, do you
know what your tattoos mean?
No idea, like what he's wearing as he's burning this Black Lives Matter thing.
And a friend of mine who's indigenous and Black and European mixed was just like, these, they just want to cherry pick like these symbols of masculinity and power, and they don't care. And it's like, clearly the tattoo artist or whoever, did these tattoos, like they have no respect for these cultures, or, they don't know what they're doing. And, it's just this, it's also symbolic of like Western chauvinism. What are you even talking about? You're gonna,
you're like gonna like represent all these cultures on your body, but then like definitely like is the one making fun of like, or like saying racist shit basically about like the virus and like burning down Black Lives Matter and something like, but you're gonna put it all over you, all these other cultures. What is happening? Like, but it's like the tattoo artist's responsibility and his responsibility, right? And like we should be able to like obviously not put culturally inappropriate things on angry white men or like white men in general, right? But
I mean, it's right. It's so, I don't know. I can't, like, it's just ridiculous. I'm not even, I personally am just like, oh my God, I think it's hilarious or ridiculous. But, I mean, what they're doing is
angle with no respect, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and just the absolute ignorance of it all. I mean, if you have a kanji tattoo, you don't get to talk about how Chinese people eat bats and shit like that,
Right?
I mean, I've had to unfollow people who were talking like that, where it's just like, no, it's not the Wuhan flu. It's not, like, stop it with that. And
like, at least have some respect for your own tattoos. Jesus. Like the ones that are like on your body, like the person with the kanji like might want to like look at that and be like, yeah, I should probably
well, I mean, for me also, it also speaks to he doesn't really actually have self-love. He doesn't, like, he's not making, I don't know, you're putting shit like on your body. Like, you can do that once or twice, but God, all over, it's just like, those are so bad.
Your whole body. It's brutal.
Like, it's just, like, don't get the cheapest goddamn tattoo, just don't. Like, you're worth more than that, or no, you're not. Okay. Like, respect yourself, respect the art, and respect the culture that you like is inspiring you.
Oh yeah.
Know about the tattoos that you're getting, not just pick something off of a wall. Like, what does it mean?
This shit looks tough. Hell yeah. We have a little bit more time. I do want to touch on like, you battled a very deadly cancer, as I'm learning, like a lot of your a lot of the women in your family, and you still deal with major repercussions of it today, right? Of how it's hurt your body and stuff. But what was that like as a tattoo artist whenever we don't have like this health insurance system, or like, we're all like independent contractors and everything? What was that like for you? I don't know how to ask that question exactly, but.
Well, I was very fortunate in that I was on my partner's insurance for less than a year before I got diagnosed. And it was a hard thing for me to ask her to do it. But after we've been together for a couple of years, I was like, hey, you know, would you, I had to ask a few times. I had to bring it up, but so I was very fortunate.
Yeah, that's super great for sure.
Right.
So
Because I spent decades without health insurance, and it was yeah, this is a good shot.
It's actually beautiful, but then it's also
yeah.
So.
Punk as fuck, right?
Yeah. Like that nose bleeding one that you have, I was like, damn, you're so
that was that was my after a year of chemo, and I was chemo sick. I had to reduce the amount of chemo that I was doing, but I got diagnosed and I had a 70% chance of survival, and then it came back and I had a 25% chance of survival, but I had to have a major surgery that removed a lot of vital organs. And then the final pathology of that surgery showed that the disease had metastasized to my lymphatic system, and my chances of survival were 0. And so I just had this major radical surgery that rearranged all my guts. And you know, I got this news and I was like, okay, but you know, I'm not done. And my oncologist was like, well, there's a chemo clinical trial that's showing some promise, but he made it clear that it wasn't a curative thing. It was like, it'll give you more time. And I was like, well, how much time? And he's like, about 3.5 months. So, you know, it was like, fuck, am I going to do this chemo for have another 3.5 months? And, you know, but I did end up doing the chemo, and I did the chemo for a year and ended up chemotoxic and had to have 12 units of blood in one shot, you know. And that was the nosebleed one, because I had no platelets. Like, that was it's pretty dramatic. But, you know, I was just like, you know, once I got the news that, you know, I had a poor prognosis, I was just like, I actually went septic. So I was in ICU for a while, and it was such a horrible experience that I promised myself I wouldn't die in the hospital, and that I wouldn't like get to a place where I was, you know, just like not even ambulatory anymore. And this is before the death with dignity law was passed in California. And I looked into my options, and I found a nonprofit like activist group who help people choose their own peaceful deaths. And I made a plan. And once I made that plan, I was like, I have this great plan for a worst case scenario, and now I'm just going to live, and I'm going to tick everything off my bucket list, and I'm going to go in for chemo.
And you know, that experimental treatment thing that was like not supposed to cure but prolong.
Yeah. So it was giving people like the median was 3.5 more months of life. People were living a few months longer. Otherwise, like I had maybe a year to live. And with this chemo, I had maybe 16 months. So my life expectancy was February of 2016. But my scans started coming back clean. And
oh my God.
everyone was just like, okay, but still like, okay, any minute, like the cancer will come back. And so I had to go get these PET scans every 3 months. And it was just
clean from the weird experimental thing, or not the weird experimental thing, but
well,
the experimental thing.
Yeah, the clinical trial chemo.
Right.
And I really went for it, you know. I mean, I went to my like whole like body collapsed, and then I only did the experimental drug. It's called bevacizumab, and so I did that for another year. You know, and I did a lot of chemo, and I wouldn't, you know, it's not the kind of treatment that you would do if you were to think that you were going to live, right, or survive it. So
what was the explanation for this thing put you into remission, right? The experimental trial.
Mm-hmm.
What
it did?
Why? Like it was only supposed to prolong, right? It wasn't supposed to be a cure,
right? But it ended up at about 3 years when it didn't come back. Like I was, you know, always Googling and doing research and like kind of stalking the you know, oncologists who had done the clinical trial, and they posted you know, the long-term results. And I mean, the FDA ended up approving these drugs.
Yeah.
And pretty soon after, you know, my doctor was like, you should do this. And I found, you know, the most recent information, and 7% of people who were in the clinical trial were in remission. And it's right. Great. It's the odds are terrible.
I know.
Right? The odds are just terrible. And I'm fucking lucky. It's insane. I did a lot of other things. And
just thinking that you were like, oh, well, all right, well, I guess I'm like gonna die next year. And then
it was very surreal.
And you're just supposed to get a couple more months for that to be, I don't know. It's amazing.
I mean, it's very surreal to get a cancer diagnosis and then for it to come back and then to be told that you have a year, or maybe more, maybe less, but a year statistically. And then it's surreal to sort of be like, okay, you know, I mean, and so it's actually been a hard adjustment to like, oh shit, I got to worry about the future again. You know, when I realized I was really worried about the future again, it was like, whoa. I mean, it's so different to be like, yeah, I can make a plan next month. You know, when it was first like, yeah, I can like, you know, I am going to see the end of Game of Thrones. You know, just like little things like that. Like I was, you know, I have a cousin who actually knows George R.R. Martin, and I was going to like start begging her.
You're like, I really just need to know what happens.
And I was just, I was very like, but I did a lot of things that I wanted to do. And even I started oil painting, something that I wanted to do before I died.
You're great.
You're very kind. I have a very, very good instructor. And I've been working with him for a few years now. And so the more I paint, the more I'm like, holy shit, like this is really fucking intense, right? I will never understand like how this is done. But you know, there's a very, very thin silver lining, right? That I got to do that. I got to tick a lot of things off of my bucket list. I went to Angkor Wat and I saw the Northern Lights.
Oh,
and
amazing.
I went scuba diving with sharks.
Oh,
So
that's amazing. We are out of time today, but I am so glad you are here.
Any chance we have a little bit of time for
Sure.
Q&A from?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Are you guys okay with that?
yeah, I'm like, oh, people, was anyone out there?
Yeah, was anyone? I feel like we're just doing.
I'm glad that we turned off the comments.
There's more people watching now than when we started.
Cool.
Let's see here. How about we'll start from the back forward. Kiera, how did you keep pushing through, knowing your family health history? You know, what mentally kept you?
I think actually my mother's death really informed a lot of my decisions. She didn't have any health insurance, and she was, she was like, she cleaned houses. She was an artist too, but she, she lived in a house up in the mountains with like no running water or central heating or anything, and she didn't trust doctors. And she made a lot of decisions to not pursue Western medicine. She was a tarot reader, and I have her crystals now, and it's really important to have like a spiritual practice or some sort of connection. I really worked hard to come up with something like that. I put together a spiritual team, and I had some really good people supporting me. So, but I got all the chemo, I got all the radiation, I did them, a cyber human, because of the surgery. And I thought a lot about all of the people who had to survive in order for me to exist. And I thought about that, like they're literally my DNA, which was the thing that, that cancer, originates from. And so thinking about, my mom, not going to the doctor when she knew something was wrong, and then, really not wanting to get any kind of help that was like Western medicine, she would go to the acupuncturist, which is, great if like, it's not cancer, but so that informed a lot of my decisions to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And I'm fortunate. I live in the Bay Area, and I have health insurance right now. I mean, I'm on Medicare now, but
Okay. Actually, speaking of San Francisco, and my pronunciation is always horrible, but Kiera from the chat room says, hello, a native here from San Francisco. How do you feel about SF with all of the changes?
That might be a question for the San Francisco people.
The question was, what do we think about all the changes in San Francisco?
Correct.
What was it? I'm not native from San Francisco. I think Kiera should tell us about it. I know Kiera, but there's so many different levels, right? There's like the COVID level of change. There's the gentrification level of change. It's there's a lot to talk about there. I don't know.
I feel like we could do an entire
I know. I'm
just
like
on that. So it's like, where to
Kiera,
start?
You need to call in. You need to tell us about it.
Yeah. Because it's like there's so many businesses closing right now just because of COVID, and then it's like you think about I've been in the Bay for almost 15 years, and so it's like you think about just the changes from the tech industry, and it's I feel like go on for a while. It's
Leslie,
pretty.
you were probably here whenever that first tech boom happened, huh?
Yeah.
You're in Oakland right now.
I am. I had a owner move-in eviction in 1999 or 2000, and then another one like just 2 years after that. And it ended up being illegal, the owner move-in eviction, because they never actually moved into the building after they kicked us out. So we sued them, and I got a chunk of change, and I moved to Oakland and got a condo, and then went through the housing bubble, which was also a nightmare, because as a homeowner, that was terrible. But this is like a very important conversation. But
Well, her other question was about how many instruments do you play, and are you going to be doing any quote live shows in the near future?
Yeah. Well, besides COVID.
I was doing some recordings, some music. I was actually doing a swan song EP when I was really sick, and then I was going to have my ashes pressed into the vinyl. It was going to be special collector's edition for my family and friends. And I actually was writing music for it, but I don't know. And then I survived, and so it's been on hold.
All these plans.
I know, it's on hold. Sorry.
Put out that record, Leslie.
But with less sad lyrics.
Without the ashes.
Without the ashes.
Let's put it out now.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's gonna have a great ending, you know?
I mean, having a great ending is a great privilege. Mm-hmm. That's something that I really, really understood, because when I was in the hospital, and seeing the news of, like, you know, planes being shot down and like all these terrible, like, you know, wars happening and bombings happening, and, you know, people getting killed by police. And it was like, holy fuck, I'm lucky.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to have a good death, but hopefully still years from now.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another one here. Nakobe, I resonate with that, being a biracial queer person of color in Portland. How did you navigate being a queer person of color in the punk scene with all of that Nazi presence?
I mean, I was a really angry punk rocker, you know, that's, you know, and I played music, I played bass very aggressively, and and I got tattoos. Some of them were to myself.
Just like getting that anger out, and that, like, all that build up out. It's like just finding little releases.
Right. And, you know, I mean, back then it was about shock art too, as well. Now I feel like the right wing has taken over the shock art, and the punks were like, let's be nice to each other. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a lot of things are the same, but I also feel like things are different, you know. I mean, racialized people are just still, I don't know, the different ones to others.
Time for one or two more? Or,
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, totally.
Perfect. Let's. We've got one more question and then a comment, or a comment and then a question. Okay, so this is such an incredible, intentional, and necessary discussion. with exclamation point. Sorry, this is such an incredible, intentional, and necessary discussion. Such power. Thank you for this interview. Love it.
What's their name?
That's also from Nakobe. And then the last question is, do you feel that you have carried the women in your family with you through your life journey?
I've had people who are healers who have said that I'm healing a family. There's like a generational healing happening. But I'm also like, well, there's also that HPV vaccine. But yeah. I think about, a lot of people who don't have access to healthcare and how much harder it was, even just 20 years ago. I mean, it's so important to fund, medicine research. I mean, that's why we got the COVID vaccine so quickly, is because that research has been going on for decades. And, if we could put our resources there more than defense. So many more people die of cancer than of terrorism.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And my question is your camera mobile? Could you zoom in or check out some of your paintings before we go? Or
Cool.
Sure. It's my phone. So
awesome.
Yes. I don't know. I think you can see.
If you go slowly, then.
Okay. Gotta turn on some lights. These are not finished.
Okay,
I put up the unfinished ones.
Yeah.
This is a landscape painting from my most recent class, from Joaquin Miller Park. And
did you do it live? Like we're hanging out there? Or,
oh yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was very cold, and I was on a hill, and it was very challenging. This is actually my Pilates teacher, Teresa. She has Pilates bar and jams, and I'm still working with her now, but now online. It's probably too bright. This is also, I thought maybe it was finished. And my instructor said, fingers and toes. So just oh my God. So I have to work on her a little more. She has all these hummingbirds that live outside her house that she puts feeders up for. So I included that. And then, I mean, there's just all this other,
Go slow,
Anyway.
slow. I want to see all the others. slowly, just vague. Okay. All right.
Yeah. But those two, I'm hoping to finish these two. So I actually just put them up.
Beautiful. I can't wait to see.
Yeah, those are so beautiful.
Thank you.
Is that all the questions?
There's a couple more people hopping on, but it feels like you always want to leave them wanting a little bit more, right? So maybe
I can close it out. You can see these images we talked about today on my website. It'll be under HaleyAdamsTattoos.com on that first page. I don't know if you guys post any anywhere, but Haley is Haley, AdamsTattoos.com. If you'd like to follow Leslie Mah on Instagram, her handle is Leslie Mah, MAH tattoo. And for Jess, it's Jess downspace Koala, KOALA downspace tattoo. And for me, it's Haley Adam at Haley Adams Tattoo. If you'd like to follow the QTA, it is at Queer Tattoo Alliance on Instagram. I'd like to thank Gabe Ripley and Guy Aitchison for making this possible. Live in the Castro district of San Francisco. See everybody later.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna click the button. Cheers. We'll talk again next